Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. We are so delighted that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Kyra Arnold. She is here to celebrate Queenie Corona and the 10 Little Prince. Before we invite Tara into the studio, I want to let you know about something really special. I really do. I want to let you know about it, but I can't. I am sworn to secrecy, but I can let you know this. We are having a special literary event happening at the end of December to celebrate saying goodbye to the year 2020 and welcoming in the brand new year of 2021. I can't tell you any more about that. Just be sure you keep on checking our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Be sure to listen to the show. You're going to find out about it. You do absolutely want you and your kids to be part of this amazing event. It's coming up at the end of December. Keep tuned to find out more details. Join us right now from the United Kingdom. She is the author of a great new book for young children called Queenie Corona and the 10 Little Prince. Please welcome to the show, Kyra Arnold. Tara, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for being on the show. Why don't we just start by letting us know what Queenie Corona and the 10 Little Prince is all about?
Well, it's basically a simplistic rhyming story for children aged between 1 and 8. It's based around 10 little comic superhero fingerprints who basically make it their mission to destroy Queenie Corona by educating children to wash their hands, basically, to avoid the spread of germs. It was basically born out of lockdown in the UK. When it first happened in March. I've got 2 little children. I've got 2 little boys. And my eldest son, who was 4 at the time, he just couldn't understand the concept of why he wasn't able to go to school, why he couldn't see his friends, what germs was. And it was the book I've written is the book that I wanted to give to my children during lockdown to explain to them what it was, basically. Yeah. And then thus, Queenie Corona and the 10 Little Prince was then born. And I decided to write this book. And my neighbour who's 15, has hand-drawn all the illustrations. She's done an amazing job. And my boys, I showed it to my boys and they absolutely loved it. And then friends and family started saying they wanted a copy, and it's kind of taken off since then. The demand for the book has been really, really good. So I decided to publish it.
That's wonderful. It's, I'll be very honest with you. When the pandemic first took hold, in March, I started getting pictures from authors in April and May about their book, about the pandemic. And at that time, I was thinking to myself, wow, this is kind of going to be over by the time we're able to record this and get it out, and it's kind of going to be like history. But unfortunately, it's not. The Queenie Corona is sticking around a lot longer than her. She's worn out her welcome.
Well, that's right, and I think since we've come to the second lockdown, luckily our schools aren't closed here in the UK, but. My eldest son, he says, oh no, Queenie Corona's back. He's really got the concept of what the book was about. And I explained that it's a very simplistic way, because a lot of the books that I found on the market were the vocabulary that was used was words that my son just didn't understand still. So that's why I've made it very simplistic. And the illustrations are of these little comic superhero fingerprints that have, each fingerprint has a demeanour. So they all have sort of super soakers basically to kill off the germs, and children can use their own imaginations as to how the germs are fought off. And how they can prevent the spread of germs, basically, through these comic superheroes. And my son loves that concept and makes up his own story about it as well.
You know, hopefully we're going to see a light at the end of the tunnel, hopefully sooner rather than later. But I think that that the lessons that you're sharing in this book are important, and they're going to be relevant, you know, for even after the Queenie Corona has left us here. Kids are still going to need a fun way to talk about cleanliness and keeping, living sanitary lifestyles.
Well, that's right. I mean, I wanted to craft something gentle and dignified that, would help give some context to the pandemic, but also instill that really important message of adopting proper hygiene, because like you say, it might not, the pandemic may soon be over and there might be light at the end of the tunnel, but then you never know what's coming next. I mean, who would have said that this would have ever happened? Like you were saying, in history, who would have ever said that something like this would have happened? You just couldn't have predicted it. And children do love a good story, and especially one where they can use their own imaginations. So I feel like I was able to wrap up these really important messages with, a narrative that all readers could kind of relate to.
And I think one of the things that I wasn't thinking about when the pandemic first hit is that this is going to be part of our, even after there's a vaccine and people are healthy and we don't need to worry on a minute-to-minute basis about the coronavirus. This is going to be part of our lives for forever. Kids who are 4 and 5 years old right now, they are going to be talking about the year that they stayed home for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it really did make us realise what was important. We were so busy being, busy with our everyday lives, going to work, that I think sometimes we forgot about the important, simple things in life, which I think lockdown helped us appreciate. Being at home with your family and spending time together, and I think that was probably one of the good things that has come out of this pandemic, I guess, for a lot of families. But yeah, like you said, it's gonna go down in history. No one's going to forget about it.
Now, I have to mention, you remind me in some ways of me and something that people get annoyed with. You're looking at this terrible situation. And you're finding you're a glass half full person, and so you're finding that the benefits. We've had this thing, and it's really impacted so many lives. But hey, I realize how important spending time with my family is, and that's a real benefit. I have to take my hat off to you. It's wonderful. And people are always complaining to me that I'm always positive, and it's annoying sometimes. Do people ever say that to you? That, oh, Tara, you're just so positive. Will you knock it off?
Sometimes, but I think the trouble is, if you look at all the negatives all the time, it's just going to get you down.
Yes.
So you've got to make light of something. Like you said, it's not going away, and I think even with the vaccine that's coming, I still think this is going to be around for years to come, like the flu, I guess. We have flu vaccines. And I think we need to instill these important messages, in our children, about, the most simple and basic things, such as hand washing, that, in the UK, I don't know, in the US, but I mean, the supermarkets, the hand soap, it was just going, and I was thinking, does no one wash their hands? Because it was just, it was just being sold out everywhere. You couldn't get it for dust. It was like gold over here. And, I think it's really taught people that it is so important. It's one of the most basic things, but it's so important that everybody washes their hands to avoid spreading this awful virus.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, here in the States, the hand sanitizers disappeared for months and months at a time. People were making their own. A lot of the spirit manufacturers turned off the spirit making and turned to creating hand sanitizer. The thing that I didn't understand was the toilet paper disappearing.
Oh yes,
it's like, dudes, this is a respiratory illness. You're worried about the wrong end here.
I know exactly. No, I know it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Maybe that should be my next book.
So, did you always aspire to be a children's author?
I've always had it in the back of my mind. I've actually, I've always written adult novels, and I'm actually a poet as well, in the UK. And I've just started showcasing my poetry in the UK. But it's something I've always wanted to do, especially having children, because it's so important to read to your children and to get that kind of bond and understand, like with books, children kind of get concepts and storylines a lot easier than if you're trying to explain something to them. I find this with my children anyway. Yes. And we always read books in our household. And I thought, do you know what? I think that's going to be the way that I'm going to be able to get this message out. But yeah, I have had it in my mind, but I hadn't realised that, 2020 would be the year that I would release a children's book, to be honest. But I feel that it was time to, and I have another one in the pipeline, which is really exciting for next year.
That's wonderful. Now, writing poetry and writing a children's rhyming book. Some people out there might be thinking, oh yeah, she's a poet, so writing a rhyming book, that's just right up her alley. It's something that should be easy for her. But I'm guessing that writing poetry for adults and writing a rhyming book for kids are two very different things.
Yes, it definitely is. I mean, when I initially started writing this little rhyming story, I wrote it on some scrap piece of paper, and I just sat there thinking, is the vocabulary easy enough to understand? It's two different concepts, and like you say, I'm very used to writing adult poetry, and children's poetry is very, very different. You've got to use different words and phrases that children in that age bracket are going to be able to understand, and that is hard in itself. So yes, it is hard. It's not that easy. And I'm
imagining too. It must be different because in writing for kids, you kind of have to be concrete, whereas when you're writing poetry for adults, you can use more images and whatnot.
That's right. Yes, you're right. You can use more imagery with adult poetry, whereas with children's poetry, you've got to get the wording right to get that universal message out there. It's two very different things. And I must admit, I did come out of my comfort zone a little bit because this is my first children's book and it's something that I've never done before. Whereas the poetry, I'm forever writing adult poetry. And even writing a children's book, a non-rhyming children's book, is difficult in itself to try and relay a storyline for young children. So yeah, it is fairly difficult. It hasn't been easy, and also getting illustrations that also fit with the book.
Yeah, I was going to speak to you about your choice in illustrators. First, we need to give a shout out to your neighbor and let us know who she is. But how did that collaboration happen?
So my neighbour's called Kyra Arnold. She's a 15-year-old teenage girl. She is an amazing, talented artist. She normally draws more sort of artistic, she can kind of draw you as you are, basically. She's not used to drawing characters or cartoons, so she was kind of out of her comfort zone. And I just approached her and asked her if she would be willing to draw some illustrations for this book and see what she can come up with. And we kind of collaborated, and she sent me a few draft copies of her ideas, and then I spoke to her about what kind of characters I wanted for the book, and then we went from there. And then I sent her the story, and then she illustrated all the pages for me, and there was a few little tweaks along the way, and then that's how the book all came together.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. I want to talk a little bit about the experience of having young kids during this time. My wife and I, our kids are grown and have their own places, so it's difficult for us because we're not able to be with our kids. And, one is, my son is about an hour or so away from us. My daughter is 6 hours away from us. So that's hard. But I'm imagining that having real little ones in the house during this time must be especially challenging.
Well, yes, it was definitely challenging. I mean, as I mentioned, my eldest is 4, my youngest is 1, and having them, having the two of them around since March, basically, of this year. We've been together 24/7, pretty much. And trying to entertain them, really, has been the hardest thing, I guess. Luckily, we had an amazing summer here in the UK. Normally, one day is very different to the next, and it rains most of the summer. But this summer, it was very different. It was very hot. We had a heat wave this year, very dry, very minimal rain. So we were out in the garden. When the restrictions were eased, we were able to go out for walks along the beach for an hour because we live by the sea. But it also, because the schools were closed and the nurseries were closed, it meant that my eldest son, he wasn't getting the learning, he wasn't getting the education that he really needed. He had lots of questions. He wanted to learn lots of things that I physically couldn't offer him that school does and nursery does. So that was quite challenging in itself. But there's lots of painting and lots of arts and crafts and things going on. We did lots of like DIY dinosaur lands and all sorts in the garden, which was fun. We had lots of little adventures, which I'm sure especially my eldest, he'll remember, like you said, in years and years to come.
Yeah. I think that is something that's going to be something that kids will remember and hopefully embrace, that we did have this incredibly challenging time, and families really rallied together to support each other and help each other get through this unprecedented moment in history.
Yeah, and I tell you what, I think also the pandemic has brought a sense of community, especially in our town. Whereas before, again, everyone has busy lives. We revolve around technology and going to work and, just rallying around in our cars and, computers and things, and since the world kind of stopped and we weren't allowed to do the things that we were normally doing, there's been a real sense of community spirit, I feel. I mean, how's it been for you?
I do agree. I think there has been a lot of folks going out and being aware of the fact that we are in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. And some of us are able to get through this much more comfortably. I know my wife and I have gone out and done some extra shopping to be able to share food with folks that we know don't have as many resources as we have, and so that, and I'm seeing a lot of that, and I think that's really wonderful. And it's also one of the things that happened here in the States. I don't know if it happened over in the UK. Is a lot of families in the community got creative to kind of take away the boredom. There were teddy bear kind of hunts. Yeah. And people were sticking teddy bears. I mean, I even found some of my kids' teddy bears and stuck them in our windows. So things like that, it was really encouraging to see that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we've had the same. We've had like rainbows painted inside the window. So every time you're walking past someone's house, you see lots of rainbows and colour. And this year for Halloween, one of the towns nearby, they did a scarecrow hunt where basically all the neighbours come together and did different scarecrows. So they made like Room on a Broom from different children's stories and things like that, and it was brilliant. You could just spend hours going around different houses seeing these different scarecrows. It was absolutely brilliant, and it was something they'd never done before. So it was so nice just to be outside in the open air and just laugh at some of these crazy scarecrows that were hanging around.
That sounds wonderful. Hey, I know, Tara, people are going to want to know where they can go online to find out more, not only find out more about Queen Corona and the 10 Little Prince, but also find out about some of your writing for adults.
Yeah, sure. So, Queenie Corona and the 10 Little Prince, it's available on Amazon. It's also available on all sort of major distribution channels like Ingram, Barnes and Noble, so all the main worldwide sites. But Amazon is the main place, I would say. And for my adult poetry, I'm on Instagram. So my Instagram account is at Mrs_Tara_Aryan.
Awesome. Well,
go ahead. I was going to say, with the poetry, I've actually got an anthology that's coming out in the next couple of weeks. So it's my first anthology that's coming out. So that will be available on Amazon.
Excellent, excellent. We've had a great time speaking to the author of Queenie Corona and the 10 Little Prince, Kyra Arnold. Tara, thanks so much for being part of the show.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Sherry Howard, celebrating the spirits among us and also helping us to acknowledge National Disabilities Awareness Day. Very, very special day, near and dear to my heart. That's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Hey, if you are looking for a fantastic podcast to listen to with your kids, be sure to check out the Solvent for Kids podcast, starring me and our Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson. We talk to nuclear physicists, rocket scientists, astronauts, aquanauts, marine biologists, all sorts of fantastic experts giving you and your kids a peek into the real world of these amazing experts. It's available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It is also available at the website solventforkids.com. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so very wonderful. Of course, we want to thank our guest, Kyra Arnold. Be sure to check out Queenie Corona and the 10 Little Prince. I also want to thank our team, Alejandro Doherty, Fatima Khan. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me, but most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.